growing weary of running from room to room, practicing one-tooth insurance-driven dentistry? Then stay tuned for the latest episode of The Lionhearted, where Dr. Stephen Rasner will hand you the blueprint for what many call the gold standard of general practice dentistry.
Hi everyone, you're listening to The Lionhearted Dentist with Dr. Steve Rasner. That would be me. Welcome back everyone. Let me begin by telling anybody very new to this that this is a different type of podcast than many of them available to you. I like to sit down with you each week as my weekends and talk about the things that made the week hopefully a good week and the things that on other weeks didn't make it such a great week. And hopefully from my candid conversations with you, you can pull gems that, hey, maybe I ought to try that. Or that didn't work for Rasner, maybe not. And end up with a practice that fulfills you, because that's the bottom line. So let's get to it. First of all, let me thank, as I always do, and if you don't know by now, I'm in awe of those of you, wherever you're from, that download these podcasts. But I got to be honest, I'm just a regular guy. So when I see a big download number in India or South Africa or United Arab Emirates, it kind of blows my mind, to be honest. So thank you. I hope this is helping some of you. It seems like it is by the emails I continue to get. So kind of bringing you up to date on what's trending in this particular Lionhearted dentist world. Last week we had our second and final course of the 2020 calendar year. I give two basic courses in my office with different levels. One's an implant course. One is a course that needs to precede the implant course, which was last week, because it's a atraumatic extraction course and a bone grafting or site development course that are all blended in together, because that's the only way to do that. So I know this part is basically for my United States colleagues, but it is an amazing course. I don't know how that sounds when it comes off over the audio or if you're watching me, but I'm telling you, I had several dentists come in from coast to coast. All the patients are planned out specifically so that some are harder than others. They all require strategic planning, like how are we going to go about approaching this case? You see, I believe that when you approach all your surgery that way, it becomes simplified and makes it for a better outcome. So I'm very big on not just jumping in, but stepping back, saying, what's the best way? Let's get the easy teeth out first so we can focus on the 4 or 5 teeth in this mouth that could be challenging. You know, and there's just a ton of gems that you pick up. You're working on live patients. I guess this is a plug, what I'm doing right now. So for those of you interested, we did indeed select 21 dates. And yes, that was one of my cats going by the screen. And, if you're interested, sign up early, reach out to Beth. They really, literally are always sold out. It's a pretty cool way for you to take what you've learned in a classroom, or if it's an implant course I'm giving, what you've learned in a Maxi course, or at the Mish Institute, where it's been didactic and taking it from that setting into a clinical operatory where you're doing the surgeries and I'm guiding you very closely. It's a pretty cool experience, but that's all for that. I think the takeaway for this week's podcast, you would think after 40 years of practice, wouldn't you, that I would have most of this on automatic pilot. And I surely don't. Sometimes I think I do. But this week, I found out I didn't. So this is about being the boss. And I know you don't all have that personality. And I don't mean being like Napoleon or being unfair, but trust me on this. Someone has to be the leader in your office. And quite frankly, it should be you, in my opinion, the doctor. You know, my philosophy of leadership that's worked quite well for me for many, many years. And how do I know that? Well, I have a range of 18 to 20 some employees in 2 offices. And certainly 16 of them have been with me over 20 years. Many over 25 and a few longer than that. And I think, for lack of a better description, tough love serves my leadership style well. So what does that mean? It means that I give a lot of flexibility to the team until I believe it's affecting our performance. So I love to tell you that they all come in on time, but they don't. You know, and listen, the truth is how much I put up with that depends on the importance of that employee's role in the office sometimes. But the truth is, it shouldn't. They all should come in on time. And I'm going to get to that story in just a second and how it's hurt our performance as an office. You know, like phones. I don't know what your policy is in your office. We certainly don't put the phones in a basket or ask them to put them in a locker or anything like that. It's an honor system that quite often is violated in my office every day, meaning people are using their phones for personal use. So where's this all going? Here's where it's going. So I do go through periods, as I'm sure you do, where everything is really running quite well. And then something happens, and there's something that happened to me this week that I want to share with you, because maybe I can head off this happening to you at a larger level. And that would be, number one, there was a couple instances, but I'll give you the 2 that really struck me and how I reacted to it. So I had a patient in the last couple months that drove to our office from the state of Maryland. Those of you in other countries, I would say it was about 300 miles away. There's a lot of dentists between where that patient lives and my office. And somehow he heard about me. And he wasn't coming in, honestly, for an aesthetic makeover. He wasn't coming in necessarily for implants. He was coming in because he had lost trust in his own dentist. You know, my message, you always hear that I brand, is come to a dentist where you can have trust and confidence. And what I mean when I say that and brand that is that trust that I'm not going to sell them or upsell them, and confidence that the work that we provide works. And if it doesn't and you're a regular patient, I will stand behind it. That's a big statement to make to you and to the patient. And I don't know whether that's the smartest business or not. I just had a recent example where the endodontist that I referred to, for the last 3 years I've been referring out molar endos because I just can't get around to them, and I can't find anybody to come into my office that does them well enough to match what I believe is the rest of my clinical services. And I've done that before. So that's a good example of walking your talk, by the way. Little get off on tangent. But I've had endodontists in my office that were not very good. They were great with the patient, but their work wasn't that good. And at the end of the day, if I hire or you hire an associate or an endodontist or a periodontist, that patient is trusting you that the work that they provide is at the same level of the work that you provide. It's not any longer the endodontist's fault if he provides poor endo, or the periodontist, or any other specialty. It's your fault. Because that patient trusted you because you engaged them with the specialist. And so, I've been sending molar endos out for a couple years. And he's a very fair endodontist, in my opinion. But he treated a patient of mine before COVID who could not get the final restoration, and the tooth became symptomatic again 7 months later, and he recharged him full boat. I got to be honest with you, that I wouldn't have done that. I would have stepped back, which I often do, and looked at the broader picture, and I'm meaning the long run of my office and its reputation and me, and I probably would have just done it over for free. I'm dead serious. Now, I do a lot of things like that. Remember what I'm telling you with regular patients. Oh, but I'm getting away from my point. I told you I had a situation where I had to show leadership this week. So another patient comes in to me that's been a patient of mine a long time. And my hygienist, who's also been with me a long time, walked into a room I was in the day this patient was in for recall and said a tooth needs a crown, which they rarely do, by the way. I'm not one of those offices that even wants my hygienist to sell my work for me, because I want to make the final decision. So it was quite an unusual situation. I was really tied up in a surgery. I couldn't break. She showed me a picture of it, as I told you that we do, on our iTabs. I'm in a surgery and I look quickly and say, okay, schedule for the crown. She had not been in since COVID. I go to treat her this week and I look at the tooth. She's numbed already, by the way. And I look in the tooth, and in 4 seconds I'm horrified, because number one, she'd been treatment planned for a core and a crown, and the tooth blatantly needed root canal. And I'm not even sure it was a tooth that we should restore. In other words, it might need an extraction and an implant. And she's already numb, because I had gotten into a groove and such faith that my office was on automatic pilot that it never even occurred to me to recheck that chart between the time that I just alluded to and the time of this patient's appointment a few days later. So there I am. And a lot of my patients say what your patients say, which is the magic you want to hear. It's what we work for. And that is, whatever you think, Doc, I trust you. You know, if on a rare occasion I'm hemming or hawing about a given clinical situation, that's what I hear often. I'm not kidding. It's a beautiful thing you should hear too, which I'm sure many of you do. Anyway, this patient who trusted me and has trusted me, who came in for a crown prep, now has to be told. I sat her back up. I said, listen, you remember when you came in here a few weeks ago? I was in a surgery. I didn't look at you. I know you know that. I looked at a tablet. I saw your tooth. My hygienist thought it needed a crown, which it does. But now the story gets more complicated, and I explained to her. It gets even worse, because then I find out that while she was out of my office, by the way, she was out of my office for 18 months, not just COVID, because she had a liver transplant, which I also didn't know about. You hear me? I'm sharing this with you because I got to tell you, I'm usually very proud of how my office represents me and what we're supposed to do, the right thing to patients, to the medical community. And I was embarrassed. I didn't even know what to do. So I called a meeting for the very next morning. And this is what I mean about being a leader. And I was up hours the night prior thinking about, why is this happening? Because I had another patient I didn't get to tell you who drove 300 miles from another state. And I didn't know it was him and he was sedated in my chair until I was an hour into the procedure. You might say, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is I had very specific time sequence to make this patient's travel worth it. Like, it's not okay if I almost get it done and you'll come back for one more trip. I need to know that. So this is the takeaway. And this is going to kill you because I'm sure you go through it as well as I do. The takeaway was my office doesn't come in early enough. So I mandated. I don't yell, but I laid the law out. I said the problem with our office is a lack of preparation. You come in here and allegedly have a morning meeting every day that I think has become diluted into how was your evening last night? How did you like the game? Who are you voting for? How was the weekend? That's not what a morning meeting's for. And I got to tell you something. It is a pivotal part of enduring long-term success. And I repeated the whole thing. The reason I'm telling you this is I have set this in motion when I am telling you about the importance of a morning meeting for years. I mean, as in 30 years plus. My team's looking at me like I'm sure your team does sometimes. Like I'm this overbearing boss. You know what I said at the end of the meeting? I said, what I really wanted to hear? I wanted to hear one of you say, we are accountable, Doc. We know that you have had this conversation with us, not once, but many times. And we are going to make it right. We are sorry. I would like to have heard one person out of maybe the 12 at the time that were listening to me say that. Look, the point of me telling you this is you got to lead. You can't complain. You can't internalize. And if you want help with that, write to me. Don't blow this off. Don't poo-poo this. This is big stuff. You could be the best clinician in the world. You could come to my courses and become amazing at atraumatic extractions or implants. But if you don't cross all your T's and dot your I's, if you have patients coming in from 2 hours away and you don't even know that they're in your schedule that day, you're not performing well. You're not worth it. That's how I feel right now when I think back to that day about us. When I have a patient in the chair and they've had a liver transplant and I don't know that, somebody's getting too comfortable with preparation. You need to prepare. And I even went back to a lecture that I had given back in 2005 when I talked about the importance of the morning meetings. And this is how your day is supposed to start. And this is the law I laid down, by the way. So I told my team, these aren't new rules. These are the old rules that you just bent and just didn't listen to. I said, it's not okay anymore. You need a clinic there 30 minutes before you get there to prepare. What's that mean? It means your hygienists go through all their charts, review medical histories, any changes. When we used to take insurance, that would be part of the review. What work did this patient have last time? What worked and how's it? So you can ask as if you are in tune with, which you should be, with every patient on your schedule. I'm talking to the hygiene department right now. Are you kidding me? Is that too much to ask? You should come in 30 minutes before and go over every patient on your schedule. When was the last time they had radiographs? Are they needed? Maybe they have a great dentition and they don't need radiographs this time. Maybe there was a specific problem that your doctor treated or you treated. How would you possibly remember that from 4 or 6 months ago? Maybe you discussed work at the prior visit that they did not commit to. I had a patient in my chair today that pointed to a tooth, and I went right to the chart, and there was 3 notations. It needed a root canal and a crown. There was a notation from 3 years ago that he needed a crown, not a root canal. So I had no qualms about saying, well, it's no longer just a crown. Now you need endodontic therapy. And let me explain why. I mean, I'll tell you, it feels really good when you are prepared. And I don't remember if I've talked about this kind of stuff prior or not, but it comes from a morning meeting. And a morning meeting can't exist if you're not there before the morning meeting in plenty of time. Your front desk should get in there half an hour early to check the voicemail, cancellations. Don't forget something, guys. We both have one thing very much in common. We have 8 hours a day, or whatever you work, to use these two things, your hands. And you don't get that hour back if your opening patient doesn't come. By the way, that's why I never allow my office, or they're not supposed to anyway, schedule a patient in hygiene that starts the day at your 8 o'clock or whenever you start that has a history of a broken appointment. Do you know why? Because it's crystal clear that if a patient breaks one appointment, they will always break a second. I can almost guarantee it. And vice versa, there are other patients that their word is gold. You know, they could trip and sprain their ankle on the way to your office. They'll go to the urgent care after they get to your office because they told you they would be there at a certain time. And that's the kind of patient you want to start your day. It's just the way it is. But I also have my clinical team, my assistants going through my charts for the same reason. Changes in medical history. Where are we with this case? When did this case start? Where are we now? Is it timely? Did we miss something? I had another case today where the patient came in. This is the first time this has happened in over a year, maybe 2 years. And he came in today for a insert of cuspid to cuspid, 22 through 27, that was going to be picked up for an impression for a precision partial denture. And guess what? The crowns weren't in the office, and it was sent out 2 months ago. And we have a protocol in our office where the lab cases have to be checked in not the same day, but 48 hours before the patient's visit. I don't know if you want to call these rules or policies. They're just good habits to get into. So what happened to me today doesn't happen to you. And it happened over the years. That's where every protocol I ever wrote came from. By the way, it reminds me, I have a book called The Protocol Book, What to Do When. I wrote it a long time ago, probably 12 years ago. I think it's very much still relevant. So if you're interested in that book, ask Beth. I sound like I'm selling you stuff tonight. It's just relevant to my conversations. So I went back to this old lecture and I reminded my staff what that meeting's for. And the first thing it is will this day work as planned? The way we have it planned right now. Look at the schedule, what's on there. Maybe somebody added a couple emergencies, or let me take a look at this kind of patient, and there's too many of them. And I would rather a patient be called early in the day and rescheduled or moved to a different time so we don't make people wait, because it's been a long time since that was a problem in my office. And one way to begin to address it is by having a meeting that starts with, will this day work as planned? You can't figure that out unless you take the time to look at it. And then other things, intel on new patients in the schedule, intel on the hygiene patients that I just alluded to. Does anybody have a payment due? Earlier in my career, when we were less getting paid up front, that became incredibly important. Of course you have to know that. Celebrations, right? It wouldn't be great. I mean, remember, I'm trying to encourage you to develop a practice where people go out of network, which means they're going to pay out of their pocket more to go to you. That's 100% of my practice, unless the patient doesn't have dental insurance. So that doesn't happen if you're not making connections with patients. If they walk in and they get a sense that no one knows their name, well, why would they do what I just said? Why should they even come to you? So, look, we all don't have perfect memories. So looking over the schedule, maybe it's somebody's birthday, anniversary. We have this information in our computers. Special needs. To me, a special need is just not somebody in a wheelchair that we have to be ready for, and we have plenty of those. But it also includes the out-of-town patients I spoke about. I'll give you another clinical gem, and I want to wrap this up because it's getting long. One of the protocols in my book was when you have an out-of-town patient confirmation for hygiene, you have to ask, is there anything specific going on in your mouth that you want the doctor to set a little time aside for, or is bothering you? Maybe it's a loose crown. Don't you want to know that on the patient that just traveled 90 minutes or 60 minutes even to see you? And you wouldn't have a prayer on certain given days of dealing with that loose crown. And guess what? That may be the impetus that made that her last visit to your office, because they would have to go back home and make another appointment to come see you. So to me, that is a critical part. Do we have any new patients coming in? We're tracking patients in first time from COVID. To anybody that we want to be clear about appreciation, maybe they referred us somebody. Don't you think that leads to more referrals if you're very one-to-one with somebody and they know that you know that they referred Mrs. So-and-so? Listen, I don't know if this is coming across the way I wanted to come across, but I wanted to express to you, first of all, I have off weeks too. And I'm not even talking necessarily what I produced or what I collected this particular week. I didn't like the way we performed. And my office knows that. In fact, I said as I was speaking to them, this isn't about me speaking to you and asking you to do things to make more money. This is about repping ourselves what we tell people we are. It requires amazing attention to detail. Maybe you guys don't want that. Maybe somebody listening doesn't want to work that hard. Just see the volume, number of patients, and you'll make money doing that way. Maybe, I don't know. That's not what I think the Lionhearted dentist is all about. And I guess the takeaway is that sometimes, even from me, the one you're listening to right now, the system breaks down and it requires you to step up to the plate and react to it. I can tell you that my office, I'm positive of one thing, did perform better after that meeting and will for a while, but it won't last. It will require me to go back over to it's endless. But I always say this, and I'm going to say it to you again. If you listen to me, and don't forget my story, I once took a practice from 700,000 to 2.4 million without ever stepping foot in his practice. And he was 68 when I started working with him. I'm not telling you that because I want to consult with you. I'm telling you that that's how impactful some of these principles that you hear me talk about. And it's a lot, right? I mean, here you are getting your skill sets together and talking about case presentation, which is obviously in my ear, and I want to put it in your ear almost every podcast. And now I'm talking that you have to be a leader too, which is not natural to all of us. I don't care. Because if you listen to these cornerstones and your practice increases $1 million over the next 3 years, which is very, very doable, you have the most to gain or the most to lose. So that's why you don't even have time to feel sorry for your poor self, like sometimes I do. You just have to be the leader. Your staff wants you to be the leader. I hope this helps some of you. Leadership's a big thing. Next week, I'm going to go back to some case presentation tools and skills because that's the heart of the fuel that generates what you do each week. Thanks for listening, guys. Send your friends. Reach out to my email, Dr. Dr. Rasner, Rasner at AOL.com. Let me know you're listening. Maybe I'll raffle off the next 5 emailers and send you that protocol book on me that I talked about. That's not all of you. That's who writes to me, and I raffle off. If there's 5 and I reach in, one of you is going to win. So anyway, have a great week. Stay strong. You're on the right track. If you're listening to me, you're on the right track. Thanks for tuning in.